BBC Sounds. Music, radio, podcasts.
Hello, it's Anna Hill here with Farming Today podcast. The UK imports 80% of its fruit and nearly half its veg. With climate change impacting production, can we afford to rely on other countries for our food? We'll have more on that in just a moment. Today and all week, we're exploring the new reality of too little water or too much water here in the UK, drought and extreme rainfall. We can respond to that by changing how humans manage land and rivers, but there's also the possibility of harnessing natural processes. Beavers can slow river flows by building dams. Their reintroduction to the UK is controversial, but this year the government's announced Natural England will licence releases of beavers into the wild. On Exmoor, the National Trust is re-wetting part of its honeycut estate through engineering and by allowing beavers to do their work. At the moment, the beavers are in enclosures, but the Trust plans to apply for wild release licences. Sarah Swadling has been to visit.
It's a mighty fence to keep them in, Ben.
It is. It's fit for purpose. It looks like something from Jurassic Park, doesn't it? You're in Paddocks Wood now. This is one of our beaver enclosures. We've got two at the moment, both about 3 hectares. So this is an old mill leak pond. And none of this water was here before beaver, so these were kind of muddy puddles, really. And you can see we've had a bit of rain the last couple of days, but not much. Most of the landscape is still really parched, really dry. But these are, lush, green, so they're holding this water in the landscape.
Ben Eardley from the National Trust and myself are looking out across a slightly brackish, greenish pond surrounded by woodland, and in the water there are various bits of felled tree. Is that the work of the beavers?
Yeah, they felled that wood. So this is about 4 or 5 years activity. So people think they just go out and fell all the trees. They don't. They utilise trees sometimes. So they will cache woody material in their ponds to get through sort of leaner times in the winter. But at this time of year, they'll be browsing on this ground vegetation. They create this deep water to move around. So they like about 60 to 70 centimetres of water, and they use that to access food and escape predation. They still think there's bears and wolves around.
And how has what they've done changed the surrounding area and changed how the water behaves here?
Before the water was moving through the site very quickly, our river catchments are drainage at the moment. What the beavers do is they create a sponge of water in that system. And they've done a lot of the things that we would want to do in this site anyway, from a wildlife, from a habitat management point of view. So you can see there's a lot of light. So they've coppiced the woodland, they've brought that light in. That leads to a lot of growth, a lot of opportunities for other wildlife.
Can you shape how beavers behave?
Yes, you can. You can certainly incentivise it. So it sort of
incentivise the beavers. That sounds like you're kind of paying them.
No, well, yeah, you can pay them in parsnips and carrots. They are parsnip addicts, so they'll do anything for parsnips. Yes, you can. So you can manage and mitigate their activity, but you can also incentivise it. So you can plant species that they like.
What do they like?
They love willow. So willow is their go-to, really. Bird cherry, willow, aspen. If there's areas of channel that you want them to be active in, you can also create sort of structures in channel that just makes it easier for them to build dams. And then they will tend to use those things. They're like us. It's kind of minimum effort, maximum gain. So you can for sure sort of incentivise, sort of guide, direct where you might want them to affect change. Beavers are great where you want beaver activity, but there are certain places where you won't want beaver activity. If you've got an orchard that you're managing, like a community orchard, which we've got on the estate, or if you're a farmer or another land manager that's got some trees that they don't want affected by beaver activity. But you can manage that really effectively. We've done it in this enclosure. You can just use chicken wire, other things like that. It's about working with people, identifying beaver activity, and then if that's an area where you want that activity, working with that. If you don't want that activity, then there's certain things that you can do to very easily prevent it.
Some people worry that once beavers are out in the wild, that it is potentially very difficult to manage where they go and what they do, given that they're a protected species. It's
important to say there are already wild living beaver in English rivers, so that horse has already bolted Where they've got deep water and access to vegetation, they'll just browse and graze happily.
Where they haven't?
And when they haven't, they might do this, but that is generally going to be in areas that are sort of out of the way. That's not to say that they won't need to be managed, they will. What we're trying to demonstrate here at Hunnicutt is that, we've got a plan, we're going to put resource to it, dedicated staff, volunteers, equipment to manage it properly. That's certainly something that the government needs to consider more widely. I think a species like this, it's like any wildlife. If we have more wildlife, it's going to need management. And I think that's something that we need to acknowledge.
Ben Eardley there from the National Trust's Hunnicutt estate on Exmoor. Well, water management is such a burning topic at the moment that the National Farmers Union held its first water summit this week on a Yorkshire farm. At the event, the chair of the Environment Agency, Alan Lovell, said reservoirs to store water for crops should be made exempt from planning permission. The Environment Secretary, Steve Reed, also told the summit that farmers would have more opportunities to be paid for improving water quality when the Sustainable Farming Incentive is relaunched. Our reporter Sarah Folkingham was there to hear what was on farmers' water wish list.
My name is Rachel Hallos and I'm the Vice President of the National Farmers Union, but I'm also a farmer here at Beeston Hall Farm in Ripponden. Yeah, there's a huge trance of the South Pennines that's all about water, if you like, where the water falls, capturing that water. Yorkshire Water bought it many decades ago so they could protect what happens to that water. So our farm here goes into two reservoirs, one which is for drinking water, and the other one which is actually below where we're stood now, which is river compensatory water. So we have to work with Yorkshire Water as our landlord. We class it a business partnership, so we have to manage the land in a certain way, so no spraying, no inputs. We have to...
So there's no fertiliser?
Yeah, literally no fertiliser. We have other land where we can apply fertiliser, that is not Yorkshire Waters, but ultimately that is part of the conditions of our tenancy. The reason we're actually stood here on my farm today is because we want to talk about the industry, wants to talk about how can we do it better. I think farmers have made great steps towards ensuring water is of a better quality. I think we're more aware of water quality issues.
Are we any better at storing water in the winter to use in the summer?
No, I don't think we are. We need to get better at storing it. We need to ensure that we've got it there for later on because the demand for water is going through the roof. It's very difficult to access capital help, but it's also very difficult to get planning.
My name's Alan Lovell. I'm chair of the Environment Agency. Both planning and permitting should be made much easier. For simple on-site reservoirs, we shouldn't need any planning at all. It should be much easier to get financial support from the government if on-site reservoirs were eligible for capital allowances instead of being subject to grants. It's illogical at the moment that a farmer gets a capital allowance for a tractor, but not for building a reservoir, and that would make a significant difference. It would be really helpful if farmers were allowed to buy and sell non-potable water. So if they can trade water that they have stored in their reservoir to a neighbour who hasn't got the ability, then that would provide some immediate income recompense for their expenditure.
There are around 70 delegates here from the agricultural industry, the government, supply chains, water companies and environmental NGOs to have an honest discussion on the straw bales in this cowshed about delivering a clean, plentiful water supply in the future, which can also help with national food security.
So I'm Tom Bradshaw, NFU President, and the really big challenge that we've got with horticulture is we're only producing 17% of our fruit, about 50% of the vegetables that we consume, but we're importing a lot of that we don't grow here from water-scarce areas of the world, and we're importing with it water that we're effectively taking from other people, where we need to take responsibility for storing that water here, for building those reservoirs, and for expanding our horticultural production, which we have a huge opportunity to do.
That report from Sarah Folkingham. Well, as Tom Bradshaw said there, the UK relies on imports for fruit and vegetables, but those supplies could be facing a challenging future. A new report produced for the trade association, the Fresh Produce Consortium, predicts nearly half of all imported fruit and veg could face climate-related risks by 2050. Just under 2/3 of what we currently import comes from just 10 countries. Many of those, places like Spain, Morocco and Egypt, are already under pressure from rising temperatures and diminishing water supplies. Richard Bond from Ether Associates wrote the report.
Spain is the biggest supply partner and is already facing some significant climate challenges, water shortages, challenges on extended droughts, extreme heat, which are having an impact at the moment on crop availability.
So Spain faces challenges. Other countries that we import from also face challenges as well. Would you say that that impact of the climate challenges on those countries will definitely have an impact on the availability of fruit and veg to import into the UK?
I would say that definitely yes. That can come in various guises. So that can be a short-term shock, but I think there's also the risk that there is a declining productivity from certain parts of the world and production may have to move to other areas to mitigate the challenges of either extreme water shortages or water stress or floods or extreme heat in certain areas at certain times of year.
Have you identified what particular products might be worst affected?
We've looked really at countries of origin, so where we're sourcing products from areas in southern Europe, in northern Africa, in the tropics, then they have a greater exposure to climate risk over the next 25 years. That therefore can affect things like salads, berries and soft fruit, or tropical fruits are produced in the tropics.
There must be some innovations that farmers are looking at.
Absolutely. Globally, that can be around investment in water efficiency, so reducing the amount of water requirement, moving to more controlled environment, providing more heat protection for crops, and then potentially developing varieties which are stronger and more resilient to a changing climate at the same time as improving productivity.
Have you been able to assess how much price this will put on fruit and veg for consumers who are buying imported goods?
No, it's extremely difficult with a very dynamic market to look at what kind of inflationary factors would be placed upon this. But what I would say is the key consideration is that the UK, when it is importing such a high percentage of product from abroad, it's competing with global markets on those products. And so that will act on the market and drive inflation potentially if availability drops.
However, if our climate is changing as well here in the UK, isn't there an opportunity for us to increase our domestic production of food that we currently import?
Potentially, if temperature averages are set to rise, then yes. But on the flip side of that, there is expected to be more extremes of either wet weather, drought, extremes that could potentially offset that opportunity. So we just need to carefully consider what the right things are potentially bring into the UK for production. I definitely believe there's opportunities with technology and innovation to look at producing and being more self-sufficient, but our overall consumption of fruit and veg in theory should be increasing over the coming years. We're not going to move everything like bananas and pineapples to UK production, so we need to be pragmatic about how we produce it and make sure that we do have security of supply.
Richard Bond from Ether Associates. That's all from us. I'm Anna Hill. The producer was Sarah Swadling. Farming Today is a BBC Audio Bristol production.